Hi everyone. I hope everyone have had a good day so far. So welcome to our webinar from Informa Connect, jointly hosted by Pharmacon Asia and BioConnections Australia. So this is part of the pre-conference webinar hosted by Informa Connect Singapore and Informa Connect Australia, and is titled as Rewriting the Optimized Clinical Trials Playbook. So I welcome everyone to join us here today, and I do appreciate and would like to give a loud thanks to all our speakers today for taking up their time to share their insights at our webinar here. So for this webinar, our moderator would be Dr. Chen Guang, Consultant and Clinical Diagnostics Technologist from Shung Ho Diagnostics Lab, A-Star, Singapore. And he is joined by the panel team of Dr. Harish Dave, the co-founder and chief medical officer from AUM Biosciences Singapore, Dr. Tham Nguyen, the deputy director of research, St. Vincent Hospital, Melbourne, associate professor of Melbourne Medical School, adjunct associate professor of RMIT University, Australia. And lastly, by Dr. Anuj Chan, the Director of Clinical Trial Center, National Taiwan University Hospital. So I will let the panel team and the moderator, Dr. Chen, to do their self-introduction later on. And before we proceed on, let me do some quick admin announcement. So please ask your question by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom panel of your screen. And during the Q&A, please raise your hand if you would like to make a comment. The webinar will be recorded and will be sent to your email within 3 working days. So this webinar again is part of the 7th annual Pharmacon Asia and BioConnections Australia. So to find out more, please visit the respective websites via the QR code or link below. Without further ado, I'll pass the host over to Dr. Chen to start off the webinar discussion. Dr. Chen, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, everyone. First, I think each of us will give a brief introduction about ourselves, about yourself, and also the situation of COVID-19 in your respective city. I think this is the hot topic. Everyone is concerned. Maybe we start from our guest, which is most far from us, Dr. Dave. Dr. Dave, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. So my name is Harish Dave, and I am the Chief Medical Officer and co-founder of AUM Biosciences. AUM Biosciences is a small biotechnology company based out of Singapore, focused on small molecule drug development in the oncology space. My own background is I'm a physician and oncologist by training, spent several years doing basic science research at the National Institutes of Health in the US, and then was professor of medicine at George Washington University, and subsequently have been on the industry side. I'm actually, even though I work and founded a Singapore company, I'm currently in the US on the East Coast, hence the distance. I'm sure all the audience here, US stands out as a remarkably weak area in terms of containing COVID-19. We clearly have struggled and continue to struggle here in the US, and have been significantly affected in both our business activities and personal activities.
I see. Thank you, Dr. Dev. Hopefully the COVID-19 will disappear soon and you can come back to Singapore.
Yes.
Thanks. Next, Dr. Tam, please. Dr. Tam from Australia.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And it's, I guess I'm not too far with the time zone with Dr. Harish, so the time zone is not too bad. It's only 5 p.m. here. But in terms of my role, I'm the Deputy Director of Research at St. Vincent Hospital in Melbourne, and we're part of the National Healthcare Network of St. Vincent Health Australia. of over 30 facility. We cover both in public-private hospital, but also aged care and residential care. In actual fact, we're the second largest healthcare provider in the country. And of course, hitting with COVID as well. We work closely with industry partners, sponsors, CROs, promoting and supporting clinical trials. And I guess key thing for us at the moment is with COVID-19, not sure you're aware, but we're actually leading the numbers in terms of confirmed case, and the rise just, the last 3-4 weeks been quite sort of scary. And come to that is obviously there's, in terms of trials, in terms of attempts of, I guess, research in response to that, but we can always come back to the discussion later. But I guess the key thing for me is it really hits home when we see our colleagues at the hospital being infected, and colleagues actually have to treat other colleagues in hospital, and it really hits home. In actual fact, we are, as I mentioned, the highest number of cases, and along with that is number of deaths as well. And we at the moment is in stage 4 lockdown, and we actually have a curfew. You cannot go out between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. Unless you have a strict sort of working compassion or seeking medical help. So it is sort of seeing the events unfold, so to speak, and certainly my pleasure to join this panel, and looking forward to the discussion, but also hearing some of the questions from the audience as well. Thank you, Dr. Chen.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. Next, we welcome Dr. Chen from National Taiwan University Hospital. Dr. Chen, please.
Hello. So I'm in the same time zone as in Singapore. So just a few words about where I work. So National Taiwan University Hospital is a leading medical center in Taipei. Actually, there are sister units across the island as well. We do hundreds of trials each year, and ranging from phase 1 through phase 3, as part of multinational pivotal trials. So we have quite experience, working with sponsors and CROs of all sizes. And Taiwan is unique in the sense from a COVID-19 perspective. Okay, so we receive an alert, very early on, and the government actually came down very hard to implement restrictions, and that actually would have some negative effects on ongoing clinical trials. For example, patients were very reluctant to come to hospitals. For whatever reasons, and then the hospital there are government rules that kind of shut down access to various parts of the healthcare system to try to minimize spread. So fortunately, we do not have many cases, but the impact on ongoing trial is real. And from my perspective as the director of the center, then of course, I've been aware of all the guidelines from Europe, from UK, US FDA, and advise on the government to implement, sensible policies. Policies may include, sending drugs, even investigational drugs, to patients' homes so that they do not need to come in, and then you need to work around local regulation and all sorts of things. So, so that's in a nutshell what happened to me over the last 6 months, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. I think now our audience knows what we are specialized in. I think we may have a special question for you. Maybe a little bit of introduction about myself. I'm based in Singapore. I'm a virologist. So I started my study in SARS coronavirus in year 2004. After that, I work at Duke NUS Medical School, at Singapore General Hospital, and I think I worked in the industry, in the pharmaceutical industry as well. So that's my background. Currently, I'm working at A-STAR to do the diagnosis. Yeah. For more details of our background and our specializations, you can also check the website. We have a more detailed description of our background. So if our audience have special questions, you can feel free to ask. Okay, regarding the clinical trial, that's our topic today. COVID-19 has changed everything. It changed all the industries, not only our clinical trial. But I guess it changed a lot in our clinical trial process, especially if we look at the much accelerated clinical trial speed. Currently, within less than 1 year, we have already got the vaccine approved in Russia, and even in some other countries, the vaccine is also much faster than what's expected. So first, let's discuss what has changed in this field. I mean, in the general procedure, or in some cost, or in some other area. Anything you feel is changed by the COVID-19? Maybe we start from Dr. Chang.
Me? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you think that anything has changed after this COVID-19 in the clinical trial stage? I mean, COVID-19 is here and it has changed our clinical trial process. You have some special points to point out regarding this change before and after COVID-19.
Okay. So let me start. So this is Arnold Chan. Actually, I, like everyone else in this field, there has already been a trend towards efficiency, so-called remote, risk-based monitoring to cut down on the necessary manpower related to clinical trial QC process. And there is just just one of many things going on. Utilizing information technology, to quickly identify eligible patients. So there have been push, like this, before the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. What I have seen from Taiwan is just to expedite that process. Right now there is an urgent need, so that if protocols could be simplified, patient doesn't have to come back for visits so frequently, but still obtain the same level of quality data, then why don't we do it this way? And at least from a Taiwan perspective, I think most folks are on board. Governments, industry, academic unit, hospitals are on board with this. So, so if anything, I think it just expedites something that's already going on.
I see. Thank you, Dr. Kang. Dr. Dev, you have something to share?
Indeed. I mean, I think I would almost view the current situation as a little bit reminiscent of what happened with HIV. And as a virologist, I think you will this will perhaps resonate with your interest and background as well, is that how the industry shifted at the time of the HIV epidemic from very conservative approach to clinical trials, very conservative regulatory environment, to a willingness to push drugs through the pipeline, and for the regulators to allow very innovative trial designs which previously would not have been tolerated. And so we see, in a sense, the same thing now, which Dr. Chen mentioned, is that there was slowly change coming in our field, but it was very sort of slow steps, baby steps, incremental. And now all of a sudden, we are very comfortable talking about e-consent, about virtual visits, about remote monitoring, all the things that we in the field have desired for so long, but really couldn't implement. all of a sudden have become daily discussion points. And we are seeing that actually getting implemented in the field. So you now had a shift in the field. It's been forced on us, but I think this will actually benefit us across the board in all trial areas, which is really, I think, the exciting outcome of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Dev. Dr. Chan, you have more to share?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with all the points raised, and it's really interesting and touching on some of the technology aspects. And certainly from Australia perspective, you know, the technology has been used in trials previously, you know, e-consent, electronic signatures, and overnight it just happened because you have no choice. You have no choice actually to adopt and implement that. But I think for Australia, we're in a unique situation as well, being a fairly large country. The support for teletrial as well has been fantastic. And, you know, I was on a panel a few months ago, and we did talk about where it's just changing the way we think about, and this is not teletrial looking at metro to support regional or remote part of Australia, but even teletrials for within sort of the metro system, you know, part of Melbourne, you know, someone if living on the fringe, it could be an hour and a half drive to the city, not to mention parking and other things as well. And so I think part of it is, yes, whilst, you know, we are restricted in what we can do, but what it allows us to do is think about what can we do after all of this, and what are the learning lessons and how we can actually implement that. But also the other thing too is that I guess part of my role is you know, to be proactive in terms of being on trade missions and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned previously in our previous discussion, allows me to go to meetings like I was at BioTaiwan recently, for example. So it shortened that sort of distance in a way. And I suspect, you know, with conferences and so on and so forth in the future, it will be a hybrid of face-to-face, but also, you know, it's and sort of linking back to in terms of clinical trials for PI. So, you know, sort of investigator meeting, you know, instead of jumping on a plane from Australia, from Melbourne, and 9 hours to Seoul or to Taipei, you could just be dialing in, right?
Yeah.
So there's some of that as well. But to that point, I think there's still room for that face-to-face, that connection between PIs and the study team. But I think there's opportunity to look at ways to actually, you know, improve our process. And one of that is, well, I know that, you know, PIs be jumping on the plane, but do the work on the plane as well. But nevertheless, you know, it might cut off some of the trouble as well.
Yeah.
Well
Totally agree, Dr. Tan. It seems, you see, just take this conference as an example. Normally, it will take us at least one whole day to join a conference. But now it only takes us, I think, 1 or 2 hours to join it. So it's much more effective now. Yeah. So this is the general admin procedure. I think it's more effective now. How about some other change, like the ethics? I think last month, a group of scientists wrote to FDA regarding the human challenge for the clinical trial in this COVID-19 virus. I'm not sure whether this kind of ethic change will be accepted later. I mean, general public and the academia and the medical field will accept this kind of change. Any thoughts?
So let me share my thoughts. Once again, this is Arnold. I train as an epidemiologist. I'm a physician, but I work in the U.S. before, and therefore I do know of very good infectious disease epidemiologist. So right on this topic, back very early on, February, March, some folks already proposed a human challenge trial. So for me, as a methodologist, although I haven't published that many papers on methodology, it's a very intriguing idea because it's very efficient if it works. But then when I read more and more into the science related to it, then I have some reservation. First of all, you have to have a standard dose. So you can't just have someone cough on me and then, even I volunteer. So you need to deliver a very standardized dose. And for us on this panel, I think we know this, just to have that standardized process will just take a lot of time. You have to have the GMP facility, level 3 or 4, like lab, and it just cannot be done very quickly. Even though I think many of us are aware of that one day sooner activity. There's someone set up a website. Thousands of people already sign up, and appreciate those public health oriented participants. But the science is just very challenging. I probably only touch on one of those many challenges associated with the human challenge process. And then back to a regulatory agency in East Asia, like Taiwan, is very, very conservative. It would never do anything that is the first in the world. So it's just a mentality in this part of the world. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Chen.
Yeah, but I think to an extent, some of that conservative positioning that the regulators are taking is understandable and justifiable, because even though there's often, and we see this very much so here in the US, the political pressure that's being put on the agency to bend to the will of what the politicians want or the public want, often the discussion that's occurring at the public level or the political level is not very well informed. They don't understand some of the basic issues around how to conduct such a trial. As you said, the standard dose is just one aspect. There's a number of areas that are not understood. And the opinion can swing very quickly. If something even remotely bad were to happen, people will come down with a very heavy hand on the regulators, and in fact set the whole field back, not only for COVID-19, but across the board for all development. We could have a significantly restrictive environment if we have a bad outcome. So there's pressure, but it's very ill-informed pressure that we are facing.
So just quickly add on to that, and I think we know, in terms of existing kind of the human challenge studies with the UK Common Cold Unit, back in the 60s and so on and so forth. I'll take a different angle from that, is in terms of how I see this coronavirus is actually, in a way, supporting our clinical trials endeavor, is that the community and the consumer perspectives on trials have changed. They understand the importance of clinical trials, clinical research. We had a first in-patient vaccine trial up in Brisbane, in Queensland, and there was something like 20,000 people sign up for, I think, a couple of hundred spots to be part of the trial. So this is not talking about the human challenge type of trial design, but I think the discussion there is actually about public engagement and raising that awareness, which is important. We all know that the challenging part of any clinical trials is not in the ethics. Sometimes it can be in the study design, but the ethicals, the governance is fairly straightforward. It's the recruitment. And the recruitment comes from the community, and to Dr. Chan's point about the conservativeness from his country. I think everywhere it's the same. In Australia, every year, a group called Research Australia, it's a big body, survey 1,000 people on the street, asking them about their views on clinical trials. Everyone wants to be supporting, but when it comes to, let's say, what would stopping you from take part in the trial? It's about safety. It's about, and in our hospital, and whether you speak English or English as your second language, everyone has the same sort of issues or concerns. Is it like being a guinea pig? Well, it is sort of, but you know, the drugs that you've been prescribed, you're taking now, it's based on trials that done previously, or a procedure or a device that put in your body is based on trials. And so I think whilst the discussion is on sort of the edge of the type of the human challenge trials design is one aspect, I think what it brings together is that sense of, you know, from this adversity that, you know, the public is actually much more awareness of the clinical trial space. And I guess in a way, some of the solutions that, you know, people in the health and medical research are trying to solve, they understand that, you know, this is important. And when it comes to health, it's actually beyond trusting your doctor. It's actually understanding as well, because, and we all know in terms of, as I mentioned about the recruitment, I think the better the community, the consumer are being aware and being, you know, in terms of fully aware of what trials are involved, the better it is for the sector. And that comes with, you know, and we can talk about it later in terms of technology. So in terms of how AI and machine learning can actually look at ways to improve the way we run trials, the study design, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. I think at this time, we have some questions coming in now in our Q&A part. Before that, let me ask a general question. Do you think we have some new technology like AI, like machine learning, like this kind of new technology in this field that will greatly accelerate our process? Or some promising technology?
I would sort of look at it, and I'm not sure if this is directly answering your question, but I look at this more in terms of using AI and the sort of deep learning programs is allowing us to use real world data. As opposed to the sort of very artificial construct, and I'm talking now more from the oncology perspective, but this really applies to other fields as well, where we set up trials which are very rigid, where we have very clear, narrow specifications to what patient we can get in the study. And then, of course, later when we go into the real world and treat all patients, the outcomes are not quite what we had expected. But now I think we are shifting, and I think there is perhaps willingness to look at this and say, well, let us be more inclusive. Let us take all these people who are clamoring to be part, at least with COVID-19, to be part of the studies. Perhaps this will carry over into other fields as well. And now let's use the real world data. So we are having minimal interventions, collecting lots of data that we may not be able to manipulate otherwise, except for this kind of algorithmic processes. And let's see what we can learn. And will this allow us to both accelerate the drug development timeline and come out with drugs which are perhaps more efficacious, and we don't get surprises when we put them in the community?
Thank you, Dr. Dev. Dr. Chen, you have something to add on?
I agree with all these assessments, but my point being is that all these actually started before COVID-19, and you know, it's unfortunate that you know, that this pandemic occurred. But if anything good coming out of it is the recognition that there are existing tools, there are existing technology, and the current system, you know, there's a lot of room for improvement from an efficiency, you know, ethics, you know, patient protection perspective. So it's unfortunate that, you know, unfortunately patients die because of the infection. But for the whole medical community as a whole, I think we can learn something from it. You know, and one thing, as all said previously, is, you know, how can we obtain high quality data quickly? And that's, I think that's our ultimate goal.
Thanks. Dr. Tam, you have something to add on?
Well, just very quickly in terms of, I think when it comes to technology, that's another layer of the ethical aspects. So for example, you know, you might be using some algorithm in your AI machine learning black box to look at, say, recruitment, or to look at the data analysis. Now, remember, some of this is actually based on some input data, some training, data set. And so the key thing for that is, and again, this is not the focus of this discussion, but it's something that I'm sort of have a keen interest in, but making sure that your data set is sort of broad enough to make that generalization. So if we were to come and to go to Taiwan and talk to Dr. Chan about implementing some of our algorithm, and everything's based on Caucasian data, now that's not going to work with and vice versa. So I think that's the key part. Technology is there, but I think we all agree that recognize the I guess some gaps, but also some limitation as well, rather than taking as sort of scribe in stone, and that's the way to go. There's opportunity always to improve things, and some of the tools are already there. It's just how we actually, it's come under the spotlight so clear now. And but the other key thing with that is, as with technology, it's allow further collaborations, and I see some of the questions here talking about the role of the academic medical centers in the current crisis. I think that's where it comes in, the collaboration, the bringing people together, and so it's not so much of yes, even though from the, I guess from the industry perspective, there is that race, right? Finding the first, vaccine and so on and so forth. But gee, what I've seen is a lot of collaboration happening behind the scene as well.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. I think at this stage, we have quite some questions in the Q&A side. Maybe each of us will feel free to pick one of the questions to answer it.
So I guess I kind of answered that question. It just popped up in front of my eyes, not in any particular order, but in terms of the role of academic medical centers, it's that collaboration, as I already mentioned, and to advance pandemic preparedness. It comes with experience, and it's we've got a lot to learn as well from Australia in terms of, I guess, how we dealt with the first wave, whereas in comparison to, say, Hong Kong or Taiwan, it was so clear that because you have that experience with the SARS, back in the early 2000s, you have that experience. And I think for us, I think you can only prepare so much, but it comes with the experience as well. And it's how you actually make it work in your local context. But the key thing I want to emphasize is with the academic medical centers or research institute, it's that collaborations and support from government as well. I mean, I was very impressed, by the way, again, recently with Bio Taiwan. The president came and opened the meeting, and it was just like, wow, that's great. So strong support. In Australia, we do have the funding, from the government. It's called the Medical Research Future Fund, which is a $20 billion funding pot supporting a lot of clinical research and so on and so forth. So yeah, collaborations, but also funding and really working closely and taking lessons from previous time as well.
So there was a question I saw on telehealth, and perhaps I can make some comments on that. And I'm going to sort of frame it partly in terms of what I see happening in the US and what I'm seeing happening in the Asia-Pac context as well. The use of telehealth is, again, as Dr. Chen said about the other discussion we had, this is not something new. We have clearly had telehealth with us for some years now, and there has been perhaps a quicker uptake of telehealth just for routine medical care in the Asia-Pac region than we have seen in Western countries. But I think now, particularly in the sort of COVID-19 and the upcoming post-COVID-19 era, I think that is going to become a much more important part in how we manage trials. I mean, the concept of having the patient come in from home to the principal investigator's office, whether that's in a big academic center, as is often the case in Asian countries, or into a private oncologist or private doctor's office, perhaps a little bit more common here in US or Europe. That paradigm is changing. The patients have never been happy driving distances to come into the office and then fighting for parking and waiting to be seen. So if that can be done by telehealth, makes a huge difference. And in fact, I spent this last about 6 months, we had a study we had written, which is just about to start when COVID-19 impacted us. And we took that opportunity to go back to the protocol and say, what can we change in the protocol that is now telehealth friendly, where the patient can be seen remotely, and not only sort of by us or by the principal investigator sitting in the academic center, but what we could not do with the PI seeing the patient through a video link, could we use a local physician in the community who could act as the arms and legs and get the work done? Can we get the blood collection done in the local community without jumping through loopholes, without jumping through hoops to get the work done and get it accepted by the regulators? And now, of course, there is this willingness to accept that data, which I think is actually a great positive. And this, I'm hoping, Dr. Tam, is perhaps going to make the trials a little bit more attractive to the patients. I mean, there's still this sense that, yes, I don't want to be a guinea pig, but I think the less of a impact we have on the patient's life and make it more friendly to them, perhaps there'll be a willingness to say, okay, well, maybe I think I'll participate at this stage.
Thank you, Dr. Dev. Okay.
I just quickly to add to the point on telehealth as well. I mean, often, I guess telehealth, when you look back, the history, it's already been around, but it's just the application and from the sponsor perspective, it's the return on investment as well. So we all know that, yes, we want to make it more efficient, make it sort of very, sort of very easy and for the patients and so on and so forth. Often there's no clear framework. And so I actually did a recent sort of internal work review on telehealth. And what struck me is that often we focus on a couple of things. So often the economics is what the return on investment for the technology from both sponsor, but hospitals and even the payer, the insurance. So the next one that often people talk about is the experience of the patients, of the physicians, because you don't want to, I mean, often, yes, the consultation would be, maybe 5-10 minutes, but if they spend 5 or 10 minutes trying to get onto the system, the experience is not going to be that great, right? And it's true. And so we had something recently, and it's in the open anyway, but recently said, no surprise, there's a spike in telehealth. And the College of General Physicians here did a survey, did a report. So turn out something like 96, 98% of telehealth is actually just through the phone, talking through the phone. So it's not even like face-to-face or Zoom or, so I think, if we were to implement that, it needs to look at that experience, that level of experience in terms of, because, as clinician, you see your patient, you read the cues from, your patient, right? You can't see your patient face, well, you can sort of read from their voice, and so on and so forth. And there's AI for that too, by the way. It didn't actually pick up things. But the other thing is I think it's that equity of access. It's so important. And we're talking about the efficiency. So I guess, by now you figure there's 4 E's. So it's the efficiency we're often talking about, but I think it's the economics, the experience of the user, the patients and the doctor, and it comes with that equity of access, which is so important because, if we're talking about providing telehealth, for our patient in the remote part of Australia, and they are struggling with their signal. There's no, internet, or internet is very bad. Well, actually, that's defeat the purpose. So yeah, that's just wanting to add to the discussion on telehealth.
Okay, thanks. I think definitely telehealth system allowed us to get the real-time data, and it's greatly improved the efficacy of the whole system. Okay, maybe we move to the next question from Frankie Brewer. What has been the single biggest impact of COVID-19 on clinical trial in your respective market? If you ask me, I think one of the biggest impact is that we see how fast this clinical trial could be. You see, traditionally it will take several years for clinical trials, but now we can finish it in. We saw a real example who finished the clinical trial within a year. So maybe that is I think this should be the fastest example. I mean, the Russia vaccine and some other vaccine at clinical stage 3 now. Dr. Chen, you have something to add regarding this question, the impact of COVID-19?
Right. Since you mentioned the positive impact, so I would just emphasize on the negative impact. So patients, less inclined to come to the big hospitals, as Dr. Dave, so mentioned that in this part of the world, trials are usually done in these big centers. It is crowded, and then there's risk for infection, and so that will be the impact. So across the board, enrollment, at my hospital, not just not just a single therapeutic area, multiple therapeutic areas, enrollment has gone down. Which is understandable. So for us then is to evaluate, shall we evolve into a different model as we just discussed. And I personally would favor that. But then the conservative nature of the system that we just discussed, has been holding us all back. So it is a constant, I wouldn't say it's a struggle, but it is a constant negotiation. And try to push the envelope.
I think you're absolutely right, Dr. Chen. I think and I don't like to sound negative, but I think that's unfortunately, so part of this disruption has hurt us. I mean, if you look at the numbers, I saw analysis recently of the number of trials on clinicaltrials.gov, and there was a decrease of 3,000 from December 2019 to May 2020. Now, of course, there's a natural flux in trials, and you expect some trials to close down. But when the investigators were asked why did the trial get taken off, 1/3, 1,000 of them were blamed on COVID-19, saying we couldn't recruit, we just hit a brick wall and we couldn't go any further. So those numbers so clearly overall the field ground to a halt or almost to a halt because of COVID-19 impacting the clinical trials. In June and July, the numbers have started to go back up again. So we're now seeing more clinical trials getting implemented as people have become more comfortable and all these new technologies that we mentioned are getting implemented. So now the bottleneck is shifting from the pharmaceutical companies and the CROs wanting to do the trials is now shifted, I think, to the sites. So now the sites are finding that the demand has gone up very quickly. They don't have the staff, and they are still struggling to cope because their staff has been redeployed to deal with COVID-19. So people who normally do clinical trials are doing something else now, or their focus has changed. And so that is slowing down that process. Ultimately, of course, we'll go through that bulge and we'll come back to a new steady state. And that's where I think perhaps some of the technologies and tools that we've been discussing will actually now move the needle, and we'll come to a new normal, having been disrupted, perhaps where things will move faster overall for all studies. I don't think we'll be able to do too many studies in 1 year. But even if we can take a year or 6 months of a 4 or 5 year study, I'm happy to take that. I mean, any reduction would be good.
I mean, that's music ear to sponsors, you know, in terms of shortening the timeline. And but I would add to I guess to this question is that so it's about the patients and the consumers, so both positive and negative. The positive is that, as I mentioned before, it's a higher level of awareness of health and medical research and clinical trials and so on and so forth. But on the, I guess, not so positive is that I guess the health and the mental health well-being of patients. So, you know, if someone was in the trial, and this is, as I alluded earlier on that teletrial, where because one of the state, it was locked down, and so, you know, it took 4 weeks for this patient to be enrolled through teletrial. Now it's first in man study, and so it's you know, I mean, I just can't imagine as a patient waiting for treatment or waiting to be part of a trial, and on top of that, you know, you've got this COVID-19 pandemic as well. So, and plus, you know, you're probably immunocompromised as well. All the risks and aspects come in play. So I guess maybe perhaps, you know, as an industry, we need to sort of look into that, address that mental health well-being of patient first and foremost, but I think also, you know, it's the healthcare workforce too, because I think certainly that's going to be that long-term impact. So it's already has its mark, but I think we just need to be mindful of that moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. You see, this COVID-19 has a good side and bad side for the clinical trial. Hopefully, the public will realize the importance of clinical trials, and more people will involved in our clinical trials. Okay, we move to the next question. What are your thoughts on sharing patient data via secure platform to ensure data verification? The first one from Michelle. The data share. Dr. Tam, please.
Well, I guess I'll take that one. So in line with our discussion about technology, so I think if it's compliance with, you know, your local regulations, and we have this discussion, you know, from in Australia from very early on and prior to COVID as well. More than often, it's about, and I guess this is what Transcelerate trying to solve as well, because everyone has different systems, and, you know, it's difficult for study coordinators or PI to log into so many systems. But in terms of source data via secure platform, as long as it's compliant and as long as it is in line with the sort of the local governance and legislation requirement, I think that's the way to go. And we've already been doing that, you know, through risk-based monitoring and so on and so forth, because you base on that sort of, and to Dr. David's point earlier about real-world evidence, it's the real-world data, how you actually get the data together. But in terms of source data by secure platform, I think it's great, but it's just having clear structure in place for both the sites and the IRB to actually understand, because they are actually the one who actually review and approve that. And it's that sort of clear understanding, clear SOPs in place, and to support that. And this is part of technology that I think eventually it's become the norm.
Right. So this is Arnold. So let me add to that. I agree with all Dr. Tam said. Just to give you one example is that recently we have been informed that the EMA the European authority is going to audit or inspect, you know, one of the trials conducted in our hospital, but because of the travel restriction, they're not coming in person to inspect the source document on site. So we have worked out a way such that, you know, they can verify the source document in a certain sense, not to the level that Michelle mentioned, via a secure platform is kind of via some low-tech technology, but it can be done. And so from that perspective, I completely agree that, you know, if the infrastructure is in place, then this is something that we're all for it. But the challenge is always not the technology. It's the perception, it's the bureaucracy, it's the politician, it's anything that happened in a free democratic society that we would see.
But perhaps looking sort of forward in that field. So, I mean, here we're still, in a sense, talking about sort of incremental gains in how we secure data and we protect the patient's confidentiality. I wonder what roles the new technologies like blockchain technology would play in this space. Again, I'm not a blockchain expert, so I don't wish to say something that's totally sort of inappropriate. But my understanding of the technology is that it is the anonymization is extremely secure, and that sort of data sort of sticks with the patient, so the patient then controls that data. And can allow the appropriate sharing of the data to occur. So perhaps that may be sort of the next level of security that we can go to. And I hear some discussion already within clinical trial circles of using blockchain technology for this kind of a purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Dev. I think we have answered the question. For the second one regarding the shift towards digital tools, it's almost, I think it's also answered. We move to the last one. What are the major trends for digital adoption in clinical projects? Like, what are the major trends for digital adoption in?
One of my favorite topic, which we didn't mention here, is the use of portable, like portable devices, cell phone, tablet computers, to capture some physiologic parameters, like a watch, or for patients to answer patient-reported outcomes. So that didn't appear on this list, but I think that has great potential in future development.
I agree with that in terms of the the wearables and back to the previous point about real world evidence, and real world data, which FDA put out the guideline for that. And that's what it means, is that it's making sure that from my perspective, it's actually providing some sort of clear utility for the patient as well. Patient take a tablet, they know that this is how it's actually changing, inside them, and they can actually see that. If they wear a device, if whether it's a pulse oximeter that actually can monitor their, the saturation level, how that's actually changed, sort of real time. And so I think there's a lot of scope for that in terms of, and again, this is, shifting towards the generation of obviously very savvy with technology, but also the technology is actually going across different generations as well. And there are a lot of literature out there saying that, sort of with the aging population, the elderly is actually getting on with some of the technology as well, which is great. And it's just how we actually utilize that. But I think at the same time, that technology allow the patient, the participant, connected with their family and their loved one as well. So, if my dad is in sort of a nursing home, being in a trial, I get access to some of that information, actually can help him, and so on and so forth. So I think there's, I guess, that digital transformation for which is often used, but I think it's actually understanding the transformation is actually for all the stakeholder in that path, that from the end user right through to, the sponsors, the payer, the hospital, because the infrastructure is so important, because, you've got technology. And this is the example I always give, where you order your pizza. This is like in the context of in Australia. don't want to use the brand name, but you order your pizza, you know when the delivery is going to be around the corner on your app, right? And yet technology, that sort of technology, we don't have it, you know, to apply in healthcare. I mean, that's just sort of not a very tight analogy, but that's what it is. I mean, technologies, there's a lot of things out there, but it hasn't been sort of applied effectively in healthcare. And I think, you know, the generations where, you know, if the patient's sitting at home being diagnosed through Zoom, through telehealth and so on and so forth, the drones will be deliver the drugs and so on and so forth. I think that's the future that I think they'd be very exciting.
Same here.
Okay, I think last we get an open question. For example, if you are in charge of the regulatory authorities, or you are in charge of a special clinical trial project, any of your thoughts, any advice or any suggestions from you regarding how to speed up the clinical trial process? So that will be the last question for all of us.
I think the key there, and whereas this sort of goes against the natural conservatism of the regulators, is actually be open-minded. Let us bring new ideas and new solutions to you, and listen to us. And I think that willingness, and Dr. Chen, you made the point that in Taiwan, for example, they're still very conservative and waiting for somebody else to take the lead. I would love to see our regulatory agencies in Asia-Pac say, I don't want to wait for the FDA. I don't want to wait for the EMA. I am going to take the lead on this one. And I'm going to innovate and come up with a new structure that will allow drug development to occur.
Well said.
Doing this. I mean, Dr. Dev, Russia is doing this. Russia skipped the stage 3.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I concur.
Yeah, no, likewise. I think that's a great point. And I think often it's that sort of conservative in terms of, it's not even being conservative, but it's sort of, let's wait and see, you know, sort of you got to be bold and brave as well. But back to that point, I think often this is kind of common with technology in general, is that the advancement of technology is always ahead of the legal framework. And so that's why, but it's how we actually, you know, it's actually how we actually bring that up to speed. So I'll give you an example, you know, where we are at the moment with the lockdown. The court is actually, you know, sort of going through proceeding through Zoom. So they are using technology. So, you know, it's there. And so it's how we actually shorten that gap between sort of the advancement of technology and the legal framework. I mean, to me, I think, and again, I've seen sort of some really key positive changes where lawyers who are sort of technology savvy understand the importance of technology, because in the legal framework, often that some of that is stuck with kind of the old school, old technology way of thinking as well. But yeah, I mean, it has to be a balance though. It's a bit like the Minority Report, you know, you got to have that balance. You can't sort of be too far ahead and the legal framework is not able to actually contain it. And that's sort of getting to, you know, sort of the legal, but also the ethical side of things, of technology as well.
Dr. Chen, you have something to share?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I think if we have nothing more to share, we end here.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. So thanks so much for actually facilitating the entire discussion. So of course, I would like to thank all of the attendees for your time and questions as well. So it has been quite a very interactive discussion. We have a lot of questions coming in, and I would like to thank Dr. Chan, Dr. Dave, Dr. Tam, and lastly, of course, Dr. Chen again for taking your time to share what is going on in your respective organizations and, of course, in your respective regions as well in terms of how has COVID-19 impact clinical trials and what are the various digital tools that you all have implemented and what you all foresee that the clinical trials field will evolve in the future. So All right, so I think we are approaching the very last end of this webinar. So I would like to thank everyone for kind attention in this past 1 hour. So I hope that you have managed to gain valuable insights and of course some knowledge from the panel team, Dr. Chan, Dr. Dave, Dr. Nguyen, and Dr. Chen. So all right, so on behalf of the team, we are excited and grateful to have everyone here today with us. Yes, so for anyone that is interested to actually receive the recording of this panel discussion, please write to us at Informa Connect. So if you would like to find out more about Pharmacon Asia and BioConnections Australia, please do visit the websites as well. So thank you everyone. So we can't wait to have you back again with us for our future webinars. So have a lovely evening ahead. Thank you, the panel team, and thank you all the attendees.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.